The sun was setting over Valeth Prime, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange that looked nothing like Earth's sunsets. Jake Morrison stood at attention in his dress uniform, trying not to shift his weight from foot to foot. The ceremony had been going on for 2 hours already, and his feet were starting to hurt. Around him, representatives from a dozen different alien species stood in carefully arranged rows. The Crethians with their scaled skin and sharp teeth, the Zolari with their insect-like bodies and clicking mandibles, the Thexians who looked like walking trees, and dozens of humans like himself, all trying to look professional while secretly wondering when they could sit down. Jake was 28 years old and had been in the Terran Expeditionary Force for 6 years. He had joined right out of college, mostly because he didn't know what else to do with a degree in physical education. The military seemed like a good fit. He was good at sports, good at following orders, and good at keeping his head in stressful situations. His commanding officer always said Jake had the best reflexes in the unit. The ceremony was supposed to establish trade agreements between 3 different factions, who all wanted access to Valeth Prime's mineral deposits. Jake didn't understand the politics. He just knew he was supposed to stand here, look professional, and keep Ambassador Threlkor safe. The Zolari ambassador was an important figure, some kind of religious leader as well as a diplomat. Threlkor stood a few feet away, his compound eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. He was tall for a Zolari, nearly 7 feet with 4 arms that he kept folded in some kind of ceremonial posture. Jake had been told that Threlkor was over 200 years old, though he had no idea how to tell the age of an insect alien. To his left, Commander Velnash of the Crethian Military Observation Team was watching the proceedings with obvious boredom. The reptilian officer had made his opinion of humans very clear over the past few days. He thought they were soft, undisciplined, and unworthy of their seats on the Galactic Council. Jake tried not to take it personally. Humans had only been part of galactic society for 70 years. They were still the new kids on the block. Dr. Nina Parker was also nearby, furiously taking notes on her tablet. The xenobiologist seemed fascinated by everything about alien culture. She had spent the last week asking Jake questions about his impressions of different species, what they ate, how they moved, what made them laugh. Jake liked her. She was smart and curious and actually seemed to enjoy being here, unlike most of the military personnel who just wanted to go home. The speaker at the podium was droning on about mutual cooperation and shared prosperity. Jake let his mind wander. He thought about the message he had gotten from his sister last week. She was pregnant with her first child. He would be an uncle. The thought made him smile. Then everything went wrong. The first explosion came from the east side of the pavilion. Jake's training kicked in instantly. His head snapped toward the sound. His hand went to his sidearm. His body moved before his conscious mind had fully processed what was happening. Figures in black armor were pouring into the ceremony space. They had weapons raised, plasma rifles from the look of them. Jake counted 6 hostiles, then 8, then stopped counting because it didn't matter. What mattered was getting the VIPs to safety. People were screaming. Aliens were scattering in all directions. The neat rows of the ceremony dissolved into chaos. Jake grabbed Dr. Parker by the arm and pulled her down behind a decorative pillar. She was shaking but uninjured. The attackers were firing into the crowd. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, bright blue and crackling with energy. Jake saw one hit a Thexian diplomat. The tree-like alien went down hard, smoke rising from the wound in his trunk. Jake's mind was running through options. His sidearm would be useless at this range against armored targets. The security team was responding, but they were outnumbered. The attackers had positioned themselves well, covering all the exits. This was a planned assault, professional and coordinated. He looked around for Ambassador Threlkor. The Zolari was still standing where he had been during the ceremony, frozen in place. His compound eyes were wide with fear. He wasn't moving. One of the attackers raised his rifle and aimed at the ambassador.
Jake saw it happening.
He saw the targeting laser paint a red dot on Threlkor's chest. He saw the attacker's finger tighten on the trigger. Jake ran. He didn't think about it. He just moved. His legs pumped, carrying him across the open space between the pillar and the ambassador. He was going to be too late. The distance was too far. The bolt would fire before he could reach Threlkor. The plasma bolt fired. Jake saw it leaving the rifle barrel. a streak of superheated blue energy, moving fast but not instantaneous. Time seemed to slow down, the way it sometimes did during high-stress situations. He had experienced this before during combat training. The world would get sharp and clear, and he would see things that normally happened too fast to process. He watched the bolt traveling through the air. He calculated its trajectory. It was going to hit the ambassador right in the center of his torso. Fatal shot, definitely. Jake's hand shot out. His gloved palm intercepted the plasma bolt mid-flight. The energy crackled against his hand, hot but contained. The specialized gloves of his dress uniform had some heat resistance, designed to handle hot equipment. They weren't designed for this, but they held for the crucial second that mattered. Jake closed his fist around the bolt. The energy dissipated, bleeding away into the air in wisps of blue smoke. His hand hurt, but nothing was burning. The bolt was gone. The ambassador was unhurt. Everything was very quiet for a moment. Then the security team opened fire and the battle resumed. The attackers were driven back, then captured or killed. The whole assault was over in less than 3 minutes. But Jake barely noticed. He was staring at his hand, which was smoking slightly but otherwise fine. What had just happened? Commander Velnash was the first to speak. The Krethian officer approached slowly, his scaled face completely blank. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "That's impossible," Velnash said. "What you just did. It cannot be done. No living thing can touch plasma in flight." Jake shrugged, feeling awkward under the intense stare. "I just reacted. Saw the shot coming and grabbed it. Lucky, I guess." "Lucky," Velnash repeated. He didn't sound like he believed it. His eyes were fixed on Jake's hand like it was a weapon he didn't understand. Ambassador Threlkor was making a strange chittering sound. It took Jake a moment to realize the Zolari was speaking in his own language. Too agitated to use the common tongue, Dr. Parker hurried over. Pulling out her translation device, "He's quoting scripture," Nina said, her face pale. "Something about divine law and the limits of mortal flesh. He seems very upset." Jake tried to approach the ambassador to make sure he was really okay, but Threlkor backed away. His forearms were trembling. He looked at Jake the way someone might look at a ghost. "I saved your life," Jake said, confused by the reaction. "You're welcome." But the ambassador just kept backing away, still chittering in Zolari. Other aliens were staring now, the ones who had witnessed what happened. They all had the same look. Not gratitude, not relief, fear. Dr. Parker touched his arm. "Jake, I think we need to get you out of here. Something's wrong. The way they're looking at you." Commander Velnash was speaking rapidly into his communicator. Jake caught a few words: impossible, violation, sacred law. None of it made sense. The human security chief, a tough woman named Captain Rodriguez, pushed through the crowd. "Morrison, you're with me. The diplomatic corps wants a full debrief. Now." Jake followed her, glancing back at the aliens. They were still staring. Still afraid. He had just saved someone's life. Why did he feel like he had done something terrible? The debrief lasted 4 hours. Jake told the story over and over. Yes, he saw the bolt. Yes, he reached out and grabbed it. No, he didn't know how it was possible. No, he had never done anything like that before. Yes, his hand was fine, just a little tender. The human officials seemed more confused than upset. They kept asking technical questions about his reaction time and whether his gloves had some special modification. Jake didn't have good answers. He had just reacted. It was instinct, the same instinct that made him good at catching baseballs or dodging punches during training. But the alien observers at the debrief were different. They whispered to each other in their own languages. They took extensive notes. They looked at Jake like he was something dangerous that needed to be studied and contained. Finally, Captain Rodriguez dismissed him. "Get some rest, Morrison. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. The Galactic Council wants to talk to you." Jake walked back to his quarters in a daze. Dr. Parker caught up with him in the hallway. She looked worried. "Jake, I've been doing some research. I think you might have really rattled them. Multiple species have religious texts that specifically state certain things are impossible. Catching energy weapons in flight is on that list. So I broke some kind of religious rule?" Jake asked. "It's not just a rule," Nina said carefully. "It's supposed to be a fundamental law of reality. Like saying you can fly by flapping your arms or breathe in vacuum. Things that the gods or the universe or whatever made impossible." The trip to Nexus Prime took 3 days. Jake spent most of it in his quarters, avoiding the stares and whispers that followed him through the corridors of the transport ship. Word had spread fast. The human who caught plasma with his bare hands. The man who broke the laws of physics. The soldier who made the aliens question their gods. Dr. Nina Parker visited him every day, bringing food and updates. She had been given access to alien religious archives as part of the investigation. What she found disturbed her more with each passing hour. It's not just one species, Nina explained on the second day, spreading her notes across Jake's tiny desk. Every major civilization has texts that describe physical limits. The Crethians have the Codex. The Zolari have the Book of Limits. The Thexians have the Scrolls of Boundaries. They're all different religions, but they all say the same thing. Jake picked up one of her translated documents, the Crethian Codex written in flowing script. He read aloud. No mortal hand shall halt the flight of fire once released in anger. This is divine law set by the first ones who shaped the cosmos. Now look at this one, Nina said, pointing to another page. This is from the Zolari Book of Limits. It lists maximum speeds for running, maximum weights for lifting, maximum distances for jumping. Everything is cataloged. Everything has a ceiling that supposedly can't be broken. Jake studied the numbers. Many of them were well below what human athletes could achieve. These limits are kind of low. I mean, I'm not even that athletic and I could beat most of these. That's what worries me, Nina said. These aren't just religious guidelines. They're treated as absolute facts about reality. Zolari children are taught these limits in school alongside mathematics and science. Crethian warriors train up to the edge of their supposed maximum but never push past it. But why? Jake asked. I mean, people break records all the time back on Earth. We celebrate it. We give them medals. Why would aliens just accept limits like this? Nina was quiet for a moment. I don't know yet. But here's the really strange part. These texts all appeared at roughly the same time in galactic history. Different species, different parts of the galaxy. No contact between them. But within a few thousand years, they all developed these religious doctrines about limits. That seems like a big coincidence, Jake said slowly. Doesn't it? Nina's eyes were intense. And humans are absent from all of it. No prophecies about it. No warnings. It's like whoever created these texts didn't know we existed. The implications hung in the air between them. Before either could speak, there was a knock on the door. Commander Velnash stood in the corridor looking uncomfortable. Lieutenant Morrison, the Crethian said formally. May I speak with you? Privately. Nina gathered her papers and left. Velnash entered, moving slowly like he wasn't sure if he wanted to be there. He sat down in the chair Nina had vacated. I have been researching my people's history, Velnash said without preamble. Official histories, but also older records. Suppressed records, Jake waited. The alien seemed to be choosing his words carefully. 3,000 years ago, before the Codex, Crethian warriors were different. The old text described feats that would violate the modern understanding of our limits. Warriors who could run for days without rest. Fighters who could dodge energy weapons. Hunters who could track prey across impossible distances. What happened? Jake asked. The Great Submission, Velnash said. That's what the official histories call it. A period when the Crethian people suddenly unified under a single religious doctrine. The Codex appeared. The warrior traditions changed. And within a few generations, no one could perform the old feats anymore. They forgot how, Jake said. Or they were taught not to try, Velnash replied. His voice was bitter. I have been a warrior my entire life. I trained to the edge of my supposed limits and thought I had achieved mastery. But what if those limits are lies? What if my ancestors could do things I never even attempted, because I was told they were impossible? Jake didn't know what to say. The pain in the alien's voice was raw and real. When I saw you catch that plasma bolt, Velnash continued, I felt something I have never felt before. Terror, yes, but also rage. Because in that moment I knew everything I was taught about the natural order was wrong, and I have wasted my life never testing those teachings. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Jake spoke. It's not too late, he said. I mean, you're here now. You know the truth. You can start pushing those limits. Velnash looked at him with something that might have been hope. Perhaps. But first you must survive the Galactic Council. They are very afraid of you, Jake Morrison, and frightened leaders make dangerous decisions. Nexus Prime was massive. The space station orbited a gas giant, a construct of metal and energy fields that housed the central government of the Galactic Council. Jake had seen pictures, but they didn't capture the scale. The thing was the size of a small moon. The transport docked in one of the military bays. Jake was escorted by a full security detail to a conference room deep in the station's core. The room was circular, with seats arranged in tiers like an ancient amphitheater. Representatives from 30 species watched as Jake was led to the center. Ambassador Threlkor was there, looking haggard. So was Commander Velnash. Dr. Nina Parker sat in the human delegation section, giving Jake an encouraging nod. The council overseer, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline form, spoke first. Its voice resonated through the chamber. Lieutenant Jake Morrison of Earth, you stand before the Galactic Council to answer questions regarding an incident on Valeth Prime. You are accused of violating fundamental cosmic law, Jake swallowed. I'm not sure how you violate a law of physics by following it. I just used my reflexes to catch something. That's basic biology, not magic. Murmurs ran through the chamber. A Zolari religious leader stood. You claim ignorance, but your actions shake the foundations of belief. The Book of Limits is clear. No organic being can intercept energy weapons in flight. This has been known for 10,000 years. Maybe your book is wrong, Jake said. He tried to keep his voice respectful but firm. Or maybe it's just describing what Zolari can do, not what everyone can do. The chamber erupted in noise. Shouts in a dozen languages. The overseer's voice boomed, calling for order. The council demands proof, the overseer said. You will demonstrate this ability under controlled conditions. If you succeed, we must reassess everything we believe about physical law. If you fail, we must consider that the incident was a hoax or anomaly. And if I refuse? Jake asked. Then humanity's position on this council becomes uncertain. We cannot have members who claim to break divine law without proof. Jake looked at the human delegation. The ambassador gave him a small nod. They needed him to do this. For Earth's sake. Fine, Jake said. Let's do your test. The testing facility was deep in the station's secure levels. Banks of instruments lined the walls. Scientists from multiple species monitored every sensor. Jake stood in the center of a transparent sphere alone. Outside the sphere, an automated plasma rifle was mounted on a stable platform. The weapon was programmed to fire at irregular intervals. Jake's job was simple. Catch the bolts, he stretched, trying to relax. His heart was pounding. Not from fear of the plasma. His gloves would protect him for the brief contact. But from the weight of expectation. Millions, maybe billions, would see this footage. He was representing all of humanity. The first bolt fired without warning. Jake's body reacted before his mind caught up. His hand snapped up, fingers closing around the streak of blue energy. The bolt dissipated harmlessly. The scientists went wild, checking readings and shouting to each other. But the test wasn't over. The second bolt came from a different angle. Jake turned, caught it. The third came high. He jumped, grabbed it out of the air. The fourth, fifth, sixth, each one caught and extinguished. By the 10th bolt, Jake was breathing hard but still moving smoothly. The rifle fired faster. Jake caught every shot. His training from years of sports was paying off. He didn't think. He just reacted, let his body do what it was built to do. After 20 successful catches, the overseer called a halt. Jake stood in the center of the sphere, hands smoking slightly but grinning. Outside, the scientists were arguing frantically. The instruments had recorded everything. Jake's reaction times, muscle responses, neural activity. All of it was being analyzed and compared against the galactic database of biological limits. Dr. Nina Parker pushed through to Jake as he exited the sphere. Her face was flushed with excitement. Jake, do you understand what this means? Your reaction times are fast, but they're still within normal human ranges. You're not superhuman. You're just operating at peak human performance. But that peak is way beyond what the galactic species thought was possible for organic life. So I'm normal? Jake asked, confused. You're normal for a human, Nina said. That's what's scaring them. If you can do this, what can other humans do? What have they been capable of all along? The council reconvened in emergency session. The debate raged for hours. Religious leaders demanded explanations. Scientists called for more tests. Military commanders wanted to know if all human soldiers had these capabilities. Finally, the overseer spoke. 6 months after Jake caught the plasma bolt, the galaxy was barely recognizable. The incident had become known simply as the Revelation, and its effects rippled through every corner of civilized space. Jake stood in the observation deck of the Human Development Center, watching ships come and go. The center had been built in orbit around a neutral moon, staffed by human trainers and scientists. Every day more aliens arrived, warriors wanting to reclaim lost abilities, scientists seeking to understand what had been hidden, religious seekers trying to reconcile their faith with new truths. Commander Velnash had been one of the first volunteers. The Creathian spent every waking hour in the training facilities, pushing his body in ways his people had not done for millennia. The results were remarkable. After 3 months, he could run twice as fast as the Book of Limits said was possible. His reaction times had improved by 40%. He was recovering abilities his species thought they had lost forever. But not all the news was good. 4 worlds had descended into civil war over the revelation. Religious conservatives fought against reformers. Entire governments had collapsed. The Galactic Council was barely holding together. Dr. Nina Parker approached Jake, her tablet glowing with data. She looked exhausted. For months she had been leading the research into the origin of the limitation texts. The deeper she dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. "I found something," Nina said without preamble. "Jake, you need to see this." They went to her laboratory, a cramped space filled with alien texts and human technology. On the main screen she pulled up a star map. "Look at these dates," Nina said, highlighting different regions. The Krathian Codex appeared 3,000 years ago. The Zolari Book of Limits 3,100 years ago. The Thexian Scrolls 2,900 years ago. All within a 200-year window. All describing the same basic limitations. Jake studied the map. "You said that before. Different species, no contact, same doctrine. But what does it mean?" Nina zoomed in on a region of space. "I've been analyzing archaeological records. During that 200-year window, every species that received the limitation texts also experienced the same phenomenon. Strange ruins appeared on their homeworlds, ruins that seemed to spring up overnight, ancient-looking but perfectly preserved. Someone planted them," Jake said slowly. "That's what I think. The texts weren't divine revelations. They were planted by someone or something that wanted to limit these species, and it worked. Within a few generations, entire civilizations accepted these limits as divine law. They stopped pushing. They stopped growing." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "But why? Who would do that?" Before Nina could answer, alarms blared throughout the center. The communications officer's voice came over the intercom, high and frightened. "All personnel to stations. We're detecting an anomaly in deep space. Multiple large objects emerging from subspace. Unknown origin." Jake and Nina rushed to the command center. The main view screen showed a section of space at the galaxy's edge. As they watched, massive structures began to materialize. They were huge, dwarfing even the largest known ships, dozens of them appearing one after another. The communications officer, a young woman named Kate Sullivan, was frantically working her console. "I'm picking up a signal. It's old. Really old. Like billions of years old, but it's getting stronger. Can you decode it?" Nina asked. Kate's fingers flew over the controls. "It's in a mathematical language. Universal constants and patterns. Give me a minute." The minute felt like an hour. On the screen, the massive structures were fully visible now. They looked like ships, but built with technology that made no sense. Curves that shouldn't be possible. Materials that seemed to shift and change. "Got it," Kate said. Her voice was shaking. "The message. It's a set of instructions. Instructions for creating religious doctrines. Instructions for limiting biological development. Instructions for keeping species contained within specific parameters." Nina grabbed the edge of the console. "It's them. Whoever planted the limitation texts. They're coming back." Commander Velnash entered the command center still wearing his training gear. He looked at the screen and his scaled face went pale. "The architects," he whispered. "The Krathian Codex mentions them. The beings who came before. The ones who set the cosmic laws." A new signal began broadcasting on all channels. This one was not ancient. It was current, and it was in a language that the translation systems could handle. The voice that spoke was cold and mechanical, but somehow sad. "Attention, younger species. We are the architects. We have returned to restore order. Your tampering with the sacred limits has been detected. This cannot be allowed." Jake stepped forward. "This is Lieutenant Jake Morrison of Earth. We're not tampering with anything. We're just being ourselves. What gives you the right to limit other species?" There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again, and this time there was something like surprise in it. "Earth. We have no record of Earth in our database. How did you escape the conditioning? We were never conditioned, Nina said, pushing her way to the microphone. Earth developed in a remote region. You missed us, and now we're showing the other species what they're really capable of. The voice was silent for a long moment. You do not understand what you have done. The limitations were not cruelty. They were mercy, protection. Billions of years ago, species like yours rose to power. They developed beyond physical limits. They created weapons that could destroy galaxies. The war that followed nearly ended all life in the universe. Jake felt the weight of those words. You're saying you limited everyone to prevent another war like that? Yes, we survived that war by accepting our own limits. When we encountered younger species, we gave them the same gift. A ceiling on their potential. A guarantee they would never develop the power to destroy themselves or others. Velnash spoke up, his voice angry. You took away our choice. You made us believe we were weak when we were strong. You stole millennia of growth from us. We saved you from extinction, the architect replied. Without limits, you would have destroyed yourselves within a few centuries. We have seen it happen to dozens of species. The pattern is always the same. Power without wisdom leads to catastrophe. Nina looked at Jake. They might be right, she said quietly. History on Earth is full of examples of technology outpacing wisdom. Nuclear weapons almost ended us in the 20th century. If we had developed faster without time to grow as a culture. But Jake shook his head. Maybe, but you can't protect someone by lying to them, by making them believe they're less than they are. That's not protection, that's control. On the screen, the architect fleet was moving, slowly, deliberately advancing toward the core of the galaxy. You have 7 days, the architect voice said. Return to your prescribed limits. Abandon this foolish awakening, or we will be forced to reimpose order by other means. We do not wish to harm you, but we will not allow you to repeat the mistakes of the past. The signal cut out. The command center was silent. Kate was the first to speak. They're monitoring the signal, watching for species that exceed the limits. That's why they came back, because Jake caught that plasma bolt, because people started pushing boundaries. Then this is my fault, Jake said quietly. No, Velnash said firmly. This is our choice. For the first time in 3,000 years, my people have a choice. We can bow to the architects again, accept their chains, or we can fight for our freedom. I know which I choose. Nina was already pulling up data. If we're going to fight, we need to understand them. Their technology is advanced, but they're not invincible. They're biological beings like us, just older, and they're working from old data. They don't know about humans. They don't know what we can do. Jake looked around the command center, at Velnash, who had spent months reclaiming his heritage, at Nina, who had uncovered the truth, at Kate, young and determined, at the dozens of alien volunteers who had come here to learn to be free. 7 days, he said. We have 7 days to prepare, to unite the galaxy, to show the architects that we're not children who need their protection anymore. Velnash showed his teeth in what might have been a smile. Then we should stop wasting time talking and start training. If the architects want to see what happens when you tell someone they can't do something, they're about to learn a very human lesson. The emergency broadcast went out to every world in the Galactic Council. The architects had returned. They demanded submission, and for the first time in galactic history, the younger species had to decide. Would they accept the comfortable lie of limits, or embrace the dangerous truth of freedom? The clock was ticking, and the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. The 7 days passed in a blur of desperate preparation. The galaxy fractured into 3 groups: the faithful, who believed the architects were right and wanted to return to the old ways; the fearful, who were paralyzed by the choice; and the awakened, who chose freedom over safety. Jake found himself at the center of the awakened movement, though he had never asked for the role. He was just a soldier who had caught a plasma bolt. But somehow he had become a symbol, the human who showed the galaxy what was possible. The Human Development Center had transformed into a military training facility. Aliens from dozens of species trained alongside humans, learning to push past the mental blocks that had held them back for millennia. Commander Velnash had become one of the lead instructors, teaching Krethian combat techniques that had been lost for 3,000 years. On the 5th day, Ambassador Threlkor arrived at the center. The old Solari looked different. Thinner, maybe, or perhaps just tired. He asked to speak with Jake privately. They met in a small meditation room. Threlkor's forearms were folded in a gesture Jake had learned meant deep contemplation. I have spent my life serving the Book of Limits, Threlkor said slowly. I believed it was divine truth. When you caught that plasma bolt, it shattered everything I knew. I thought you were evil. A demon sent to test our faith. Jake waited, not sure where this was going. But I have been studying the old texts, the ambassador continued, the ones that predate the book. There are fragments, scattered references. My ancestors were different, stronger, faster, more alive than we are now. The book did not reveal our limits. It created them. I'm sorry, Jake said. I know what it's like to have your beliefs challenged. Threlkor's compound eyes fixed on him. Do not apologize. You gave me the greatest gift possible, the truth. And truth, even painful truth, is worth more than comfortable lies. He paused. I have come to volunteer. At my age, I cannot become a warrior, but I can speak for those who are afraid. I can tell them that change is frightening but necessary. That the gods, if they exist, would want us to reach our full potential, not cower within artificial limits. Jake felt a lump in his throat. Thank you, Ambassador. That means more than you know. On the 6th day, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. The debate was fierce. Some representatives argued for submission, better to live within limits than risk the architect's wrath. Others demanded resistance. They had tasted freedom and would not surrender it. The human ambassador stood to speak. Her name was Lisa Chen, and she was known for her calm diplomatic approach. But today, her voice carried steel. The architects claim they want to protect us, she said. But protection through deception is not kindness. It is control. They took away your ability to choose your own path. They made you believe you were weak so you would never challenge them. That is not the action of protectors. That is the action of tyrants. But the ancient war, a faithful representative protested, the destruction they described, how can we risk repeating that? By learning from it, Ambassador Chen replied. The architects chose to solve the problem by limiting everyone. But there is another way. Education, wisdom, ethical development alongside technological development. Humanity nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons in the 20th century. We survived not by limiting our technology, but by developing the wisdom to control it. The process was difficult and dangerous, but we are better for having gone through it. Velnash rose to his feet. The Creathian people stand with humanity. We will not return to chains, even comfortable ones. If the architects wish to impose limits by force, they will find we are not the docile children they left behind. One by one, other species joined the declaration. Not all of them. The vote was close. But when the final count came in, the awakened faction had won. The Galactic Council would not submit to the architect's demands. On the 7th day, the architect fleet reached the inner systems. They broadcast their final message. Your choice has been made. We are saddened but not surprised. Young species always believe they are different, that they will not repeat the mistakes of the past. You are wrong, and now we must correct you. The first architect ship approached New Haven, a human colony that had become the center of the awakening movement. The defensive fleet was waiting. Human ships, Creathian cruisers, Zolari carriers, and dozens of others. A combined force unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Jake was aboard the command ship, serving as tactical advisor. Beside him stood Velnash, now a fleet commander, and Dr. Nina Parker, who had spent the last week studying everything known about the architects. Their ships are powerful, Nina said, studying the readouts. But they're old, really old. Their tactics are based on fighting species that accepted limits. They've never faced an enemy that thinks outside those boundaries. Then we show them what happens when you tell people they can't do something, Velnash said. His scaled face showed no fear. We do it anyway. The battle began. The architect ship was massive, its weapons terrifying. But the defenders were not fighting the way the architects expected. They used tactics that would have been considered impossible under the old doctrine. Ships pushed their engines past safe limits. Pilots performed maneuvers that violated their species' supposed maximum capabilities. Soldiers boarded enemy vessels using methods that the Book of Limits said would kill them. Some died. The cost was real. But they were fighting for something worth dying for. The right to choose their own path. Jake led a boarding party onto the architect ship. The corridors were strange, built for beings larger than any modern species. The architects themselves were nowhere to be seen. Only drones, automated defenders following ancient programming. The boarding party fought through, taking casualties but pushing forward. Velnash fought beside Jake, moving with a speed and ferocity that would have been impossible 6 months ago. The training had worked. The Crethean warrior had reclaimed his heritage. They reached the ship's core, and there, finally, they found an architect. It was huge, easily 15 feet tall with multiple limbs and a body that seemed to shift between solid and energy. It looked ancient and tired. "You should not be able to reach this far," the architect said. "Your limits should prevent it." "We don't have limits," Jake replied. "Not the ones you tried to give us. We make our own limits. And we push them when we need to." The architect was silent for a moment. "Then you will destroy yourselves, as others have before you." "Maybe," Velnash said. "But that is our choice to make. Not yours." Outside, the battle was turning. The defenders were adapting faster than the architects could respond. The ancient beings had spent billions of years fighting limited opponents. They had no experience with enemies who refused to accept limits. The flagship began to withdraw. Other architect ships followed. They were not defeated, but they were shocked. The younger species had fought them to a standstill. A transmission came through. The architect voice, but different now, less certain. "We did not expect this. You fight with creativity we have not seen in millions of years. Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps species can grow beyond their limits without destroying themselves." Ambassador Threlkor's voice came over the communications channel. He had insisted on being part of the negotiations. "We do not ask you to leave forever. We ask for the chance to prove ourselves. Share with us the history of the ancient war. Teach us the lessons you learned. But let us make our own choices. Trust us to find our own path, even if it is dangerous." There was a long silence. Then the architect spoke again. "Very well. We will withdraw to the galactic edge. We will observe. If you prove us wrong, if you can grow beyond limits without destroying yourselves, we will accept that we chose the wrong path. But if history repeats, if you begin the spiral toward catastrophic war, we will return. And next time, we will not be so easily stopped." The architect fleet began to pull back. The battle was over. The defenders had won, not through superior force, but through the determination to be free. Jake collapsed against a bulkhead, exhausted. Velnash sat down beside him, breathing hard. "We did it," the Crethean said. "We actually did it." "Yeah," Jake replied. "Now comes the hard part. Proving they were wrong to limit us. Living up to our potential without destroying ourselves." Velnash showed his teeth in a tired grin. "Good thing we have a human to show us how it's done." The galaxy had changed. The architects were watching, and the real test was just beginning. 5 years after the architects withdrew, Jake Morrison stood in front of a class of mixed-species students at the Interspecies Development Academy. The facility had grown from the original Human Development Center, now spanning 3 stations and serving thousands of students each year. The students came from across the galaxy. Young Cretheans learning combat techniques their grandparents never knew. Solari scientists pushing the boundaries of what their species could achieve. Thexians exploring physical limits that the old scrolls said were impossible. And humans, always humans, teaching and learning alongside their galactic neighbors. Today's lesson was about failure. Jake stood at the front of the training room watching a Crethean student attempt to catch a plasma bolt. The young warrior had been trying for 3 days. So far he had failed every time. "Again," Jake said gently. The bolt fired. The student's hand moved, but too slow. The bolt passed by, caught by the safety net. The Crethean's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I cannot do it," the student said. Perhaps the Codex was right. Perhaps Cretheans are not meant for this. Jake walked over and put a hand on the student's shoulder. "The Codex was wrong about what you can do, but you're wrong about something too. You think that because you haven't succeeded yet, you never will. That's not how this works. I failed hundreds of times before I caught my first bolt in training. The difference between me and someone who never catches it is not talent. It's that I kept trying." The student looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Hundreds of times?" "At least," Jake said with a smile. "The bolt I caught on Valeth Prime, that was lucky timing. I had the reflexes because I had trained them for years. Not because I'm special. Because I practiced." He turned to address the whole class. "That's what the architects never understood. Limits aren't about what you can do right now. They're about what you're willing to work toward. The only real limit is giving up." After the class, Jake made his way to the administration level. Commander Velnash had an office there now. The Creathian had become one of the Academy's senior instructors, teaching advanced combat techniques and serving as living proof that the old limitations were false. Velnash was reviewing training reports when Jake entered. The alien looked up and gestured to a chair. "The cultural shift is remarkable," Velnash said, putting down his tablet. "5 years ago, my people would have called me a heretic for what I teach. Now young Creathians line up to learn the old ways, to reclaim what we lost. How are things on the homeworld?" Jake asked. Velnash's expression grew thoughtful. "Complicated. The religious conservatives still resist. There are protests, occasional violence, but the tide has turned. The majority of Creathians now believe the Codex was imposed, not revealed. We are rewriting our understanding of ourselves. It is painful but necessary." "And the other species?"
Similar patterns everywhere.
"Some embrace the awakening faster than others. The Zolari have had the hardest time. Their Book of Limits was so deeply integrated into their culture that questioning it feels like questioning reality itself. But even they are changing. Ambassador Threlkor has become a spiritual leader for the reform movement." Jake nodded. He had spoken with Threlkor last month. The old Zolari was writing a new text, one that celebrated potential rather than limiting it. It would not replace the Book of Limits, but it offered an alternative interpretation, a path forward. "What about the architects?" Jake asked. "Any word from them?" Velnash pulled up a star chart. A single point blinked at the galactic edge. "They remain where they retreated, watching. Kate Sullivan monitors their signal daily. It is quiet but constant. They are waiting to see if we prove them wrong or confirm their fears." "No pressure," Jake said dryly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Nina Parker entered, looking excited. She had been leading the Institute for Precursor Studies, researching the architects and the ancient war they had mentioned. "I found something," Nina said without preamble. She never bothered with small talk when she was on a research high. "Old records from the architect database that we captured. Information about the ancient war." She pulled up holographic images. Scenes of destruction on a scale that made Jake's stomach turn. Entire star systems reduced to debris. Weapons that could crack planets. Civilizations extinguished in moments. "This is what the architects were afraid of," Nina said. "This is what happens when power grows faster than wisdom." Multiple species reached incredible technological levels. They developed weapons that could destroy galaxies. And when conflicts arose, they used those weapons. Billions of years of life nearly wiped out in a few centuries of war. "How did it end?" Velnash asked quietly. "Exhaustion," Nina said. "The survivors were so few, so traumatized that they made a pact. They would limit themselves. Never again would they develop the power that led to such destruction. And when they encountered younger species, they decided to protect them from the same fate." Jake studied the images. They were trying to do the right thing. They saw all this death and decided to prevent it from happening again. "But they chose the wrong method," Nina said. "They thought the answer was to limit potential, to keep species weak enough that they could never threaten each other. What they should have done was teach wisdom alongside power, help species learn to handle their own strength." "That is what we must do now," Velnash said. "We have removed the artificial limits. Now we must prove we can handle that freedom responsibly." The hologram shifted to show current data. Graphs of technological development, social progress, conflict resolution rates across the galaxy. "It is working," Nina said. "Slowly, but it is working. Species that spent millennia stagnant are now innovating. New technologies are being developed, but more importantly, there is increased cooperation. The shared experience of the awakening has brought the galaxy together in ways we have never seen before." "Conflicts?" Jake asked. "Some," Nina admitted. There was a brief war between two Thexian factions over resource rights, but it was resolved through negotiation before it escalated. The Council intervened early, applying the lessons humanity learned about conflict prevention. "We are learning, Jake, not perfectly, not without mistakes, but we are learning." Later that evening, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Academy station. The stars stretched out before him, countless points of light representing countless worlds. Somewhere out there, the architects watched, waiting to see if the younger species would succeed or fail. Kate Sullivan joined him. The communications officer had become a close friend over the years. She was the one who monitored the architect's signal, the one who would warn them if the ancient beings decided to return. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" Kate asked. "I mean, the architects had billions of years of experience. They saw civilizations destroy themselves. What if they were right? What if we are heading down the same path? Jake was quiet for a moment. Maybe we are. Maybe we will make terrible mistakes. But at least they will be our mistakes. The architects took away choice. They decided for everyone that it was better to be safe than free. I can't agree with that. Even if freedom is dangerous, it is still better than comfortable chains. Kate nodded slowly. The signal changed today. Just slightly. The architects are communicating with each other. I think they are debating among themselves. Some of them are starting to believe we might succeed. Good, Jake said. Let them debate. Let them question their own certainty. Maybe they will learn something too. That is what this is all about, right? Learning. Growing. Becoming more than you were. Ambassador Threlkor had sent Jake a message earlier that day. The old Zolari was dying. His species had long lifespans, but even they eventually faced the end. In his message, Threlkor wrote about hope, about how he had spent most of his life believing in limits and how his last years had been spent discovering there were none. He called it a gift, the greatest gift Jake could have given him. Jake thought about that as he watched the stars. He had not set out to change the galaxy. He had just wanted to save someone's life. But one action had led to another. One choice had opened doors that had been closed for millennia. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still problems.
Still conflicts.
Still species struggling to adapt to their newfound freedom. But there was also progress, innovation, cooperation, hope, and that, Jake thought, was worth fighting for. The next morning, Jake returned to his classroom. The same Krethian student was there early, waiting by the plasma rifle. The young warrior looked determined. I want to try again, the student said. I thought about what you said, about failure being part of the process. I am ready to fail 100 more times if that is what it takes. Jake smiled. Then let's get started. Remember, watch the bolt. Do not think about whether you can catch it. Just react. Trust your body to do what it is capable of. The rifle charged. The student took a ready stance. The bolt fired. The Krethian's hand moved. Faster than before. More confident. Fingers closed around blue energy. For just a moment, the bolt crackled in his palm. Then it dissipated. The student stared at his hand in wonder. I did it. I actually did it. Yes, you did, Jake said. And now you know. The limits you were taught were lies. The only limits that matter are the ones you set for yourself. And even those can be pushed when you need to.